For an expert's analysis, we are joined by Daniel Casino. He's a professor of government and politics of Fairleigh Dickinson University and executive director of FDU Poll. Professor, thank you very much for your time. First of all, your reaction to Mr. Biden's decision, and what do you think has ultimately made him to exit the race?
I think what caused him to exit the race really is the pressure that he was getting, both from party donors and from party elites. We even had the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, saying that he should step aside. And it's very difficult for him to plot a way forward in the election if he didn't have support of those party elites and especially of big party donors. We'd heard that tens of millions of dollars of donations were being withheld from his campaign. Without that money, it wasn't clear he was going to be able to move forward at all. So with the doubts in the public, despite the fact he was largely tied with Donald Trump in polls, it seemed like he didn't have much of a choice, that there wasn't going to be much way to raise his numbers. The fundamental fight in this election is about whether this is a referendum on Joe Biden or a referendum on Donald Trump. And as long as we were talking about Joe Biden's age, this was going to be all about Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, whatever else you might think of him, has never been particularly popular with the public. If this was just about Joe Biden, he was probably going to lose. I imagine what happened was sometime this afternoon, he came to the conclusion that the most important thing was to keep Donald Trump out of office as far as he was concerned, and that someone else, presumably Vice President Harris, would be more capable of doing that.
Professor Casino, for weeks now, and I'm going to use a football analogy, the team has been asking Joe Biden to pass the ball, make the throw. He's finally done it, and the ball is in the Democrats' hands right now. But I do get a sense, that they're not quite sure what to do with it. Is this an opportunity? Is this a moment for them to lift their campaign after the past weeks, which saw the GOP, if you like, score, victory after victory and rise in the polls?
It certainly potentially helps, because we had a lot of Democrats who were really just disenchanted. They were worried about Joe Biden. They didn't think Joe Biden was a great candidate, but they felt trapped. Like, well, I don't like either of these candidates. What am I supposed to do? And we actually had large numbers of Americans in response to polls telling us that they were planning to vote in the Senate for Democrats for the Senate, but not planning to vote for president because they didn't like either candidate. And that's just something that's really unprecedented in American political history. So this does give the Democrats an opportunity to get a candidate out there that people are actually excited about, that people are interested in supporting, in really getting the vote out, especially the vote among African-American men and African-American women, where Democrats have been facing real fears that those supporters, who are generally the biggest supporters of Democratic candidates, really seem to have been dropping in their support for Biden. So putting a Black woman on the ticket, at the top of the ticket, seems like it might get that support back. If they had lost that support, the race would have been over. So it's possible. The problem is, though, that Kamala Harris is not universally liked within the party. While she does face some opposition from the liberal wing of the party that really does not like her record as a prosecutor back in California. Remember, there's a lot of Democrats who are very much in favor of defunding the police and don't like the criminal justice system. And the fact that Kamala Harris is associated with that might help her among moderate voters, but certainly turns off some of those liberal voters that she's going to need in order to win. On the other hand, she might also be saddled with many of the things people didn't like about the Biden administration. Republicans are going to do everything they can to try and say it was the Biden-Harris administration, that Harris did all of this too, to give themselves something to run against. So there are certainly downsides. We also know that last time the Democrats nominated a woman for president, Hillary Clinton, it did not go over well. There were immediately, concerns, really sexist claims made against her, and a lot of people in the country just weren't ready to vote for a woman for president.
And Professor, we know that Ms. Harris is the heavy favorite for now, but there are calls for an open nomination process. In what ways might the open convention benefit or challenge the Democratic Party?
So the benefit of an open convention would certainly be that it would be a television spectacle. We haven't had an open convention in American politics, even a contested convention, really since the 1960s. And there's a lot of people in the country, political observers, who just want to see one happen. And they're very excited at the prospect of an open convention. An open convention where all the delegates who've already been elected would be released by Joe Biden, would be allowed to vote for whoever they wanted. This is the way conventions were done in the 19th century, and they lead to unpredictable outcomes. So a lot of people are interested in seeing that. And so the upside would be that it would be a spectacle, that you'd have people really paying attention to Democrats, that all the potential candidates would have the chance to make their case to the party, and the best candidate would win. The downside would be that there'd be a lot of people who would like one of the candidates who didn't win. So if you were someone who really thought Pete Buttigieg did the best job in the convention, he didn't get it, maybe you'd be less likely to support Kamala Harris going forward. So there are certainly dangers to it. That said, it doesn't look like we're going that direction. It looks like Kamala Harris was very ready for this. There were a lot of endorsements coming out of the gate in the few hours afterwards. Joe Biden endorsed her and turned over the funding apparatus, which is a huge deal, that now Kamala Harris has access to the entire Biden-Harris campaign funds. It's going to be very hard for anyone else to match that. There are a lot of Democratic elites who really would like to see someone other than Kamala Harris in that position, someone like J.B. Pritzker of Illinois or even Roy Cooper of North Carolina. But it doesn't look like they're going to get that chance.
I do want to pick up on that point, Professor Casino. Some of the so-called elites, some of their faces came up silent on Harris, the most high profile being Barack Obama, but we also had Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, and Pete Buttigieg. I mean, I'm curious, is this telling, or is it simply too early to be reading too much into their immediate statements?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some delay. I think Kamala Harris actually put herself in a very good position by getting out so quickly with all these endorsements immediately. And what we're going to see tomorrow morning, she's going to try and cement this by putting out fundraising numbers. She's going to say overnight, after the announcement, we raised 18 million, 20 million, 30 million, whatever it is. And that's going to try and make her case. And her job at this point is try and prevent anyone else from jumping in the fray. If somebody else jumps in, if you get someone else who decides they want to run, someone like Gavin Newsom, for instance, if they did that, then you're going to see the floodgates open. You're going to see a whole bunch of other candidates jumping in and potentially challenging her at the convention. If she can keep them at bay for now and say, look, this is already decided, it's going to be Kamala Harris, you can get on board or you can get under the bus. If that happens and no one else challenges her, then it's going to be very hard for someone to show up at the convention to try and make this contested convention. I think at this point, the dynamics are towards a coronation, but that could certainly change. Tomorrow we could see 3 or 4 big candidates coming out, and I guarantee you they are all huddling with their strategists right now, trying to figure out if it is worthwhile for them to jump in. There are certainly candidates like Gavin Newsom, like New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, who have put themselves in position thinking they're going to have the big shot right now, and we're going to have to see if they're actually going to try and take it.
All right, Professor Casino, thank you very much for your expertise this morning. Daniel Casino, Professor of Government and Politics at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Thank you.